Thanks for having us here today. I'm Jamey Grimes. I'm a professor in the art department, and we're going to talk to you a lot today about Flow Tuscaloosa. We'll get into that extensively, but yeah, I'm just a sculpture professor here. I grew up in Tuscaloosa. A lot of the project revolves around our local waterways that I've grown to love just being here, and we're trying to kind of promote that sort of stuff. And this is Julia Brock.
Hey everyone, I'm Julia Brock. I'm a faculty member in the history department, and I coordinate a public history program, and I am a public historian, and I can talk more about what that is if you're interested later. But we're really excited to talk with you about Flow Tuscaloosa. This is pretty informal. We have some media to show you and want to talk to you about our process, but we'd also love to maybe brainstorm with you all by the end of this period and have it be a little bit more of an interactive session. So just heads up. Yeah, do we want to
Let's dive right in.
All right.
Everybody can hear okay?
Okay, and can y'all see the screen okay? Do we need more lights off? Okay. I'm just going to get us kicked off by talking to you a little bit about how Flow Tuscaloosa came to be. It really was catalyzed by my participation and Jamey's participation as fellows of the Collaborative Arts Research Initiative, or CARI, C-A-R-I. Part of the Arts and Sciences, School of Arts and Sciences. It's a fairly new program that was created to really generate interest in arts-based research, but very much like the Water Institute, likes to encourage transdisciplinary research in the arts. So I applied and was accepted in the same cohort as Jamey was, that first cohort in 2019. And the whole point of it is really to bring people interested in arts-based research together to try to find common purpose, to try to create new kinds of creative work and research. And Jamey and I just happen to both have an interest in local natural resources. I also brought to the fellowship a collaborative, which I'm a part of, called the Selvage Collective. We're a curatorial collective made up of myself and two contemporary artists and art curators, and we really try to visualize historical narratives through contemporary art. That's kind of, we think of our work as experimental in that way. And we had just finished a project in Ireland and decided the next thing we wanted to do was plan a parade. We didn't know what that parade was going to be about. We didn't know anything about it. And then we met Jamey. And we began conversations around how to bring people together to celebrate and potentially inspire stewardship of our natural resources. And so the common resource we settled on was Hurricane Creek, which is in Tuscaloosa County. How many people have been to Hurricane Creek? Great, that's a lot of people. And if you haven't been, we hope this talk will inspire you to go. So we began, the process really started through organic conversations around, again, common interests. But what we realized we needed to kind of enact some kind of public arts and participatory project around the creek and telling the story of the creek was we needed to find support. So we began talking to stakeholders we assumed would be interested, local river keepers, other water keepers. The Friends of Hurricane Creek was our key partner, community partner, and we'll talk a little bit about them in a little bit. But we also applied for grants, and so we were fortunate in that the project was ultimately supported by an NEA Our Town grant. Our Town is meant to sort of invest money in projects that have the potential to change public infrastructure in a place through participatory arts project. We also looked to the university and found generous support in both the College of Arts and Sciences and various departments. CARI supplied a lot of our seed funding and critical seed funding for the project, which we will talk to you about the parameters of in just a minute. Thank you. So just to give a shout out to all of the people and institutions that supported this project, and we'll get into more of the particulars of what we actually did. And for that, I'm going to turn over to Jamey for the first part.
So there were a lot of moving parts throughout the project, and it's maybe a boring talk if we give you every step. So what we want to hit on is some of the highlights of what we headed towards. We'll talk a little bit though about the troubles that we would encounter along the way. I think you'll learn more from failures than successes quite often, but I do also feel like we had a lot of success with the project. So there are different aspects of the project, and I want to begin by talking about educational workshops. We had content that we wanted to provide to the community that would tie them in a meaningful way into the subject that we wanted to present, which was, again, this stewardship of our local resources, particularly Hurricane Creek. I will say that as we started to negotiate things like applying for larger grants, you start to take on subjects like accessibility, and these are important, but some of the spaces that we wanted to invite people were not ready for the scale of what we wanted to bring. And so we will pivot a couple times in our sort of planning stages and adjustment stages as to what we present to the public, and that's some of what I want to address today. So we end up ultimately presenting a walking lantern parade along Tuscaloosa's Riverwalk. And if you think about the difference between some of the Hurricane Creek resources and the downtown Tuscaloosa resources, it was very helpful for us in securing grants to be able to ensure that if we had a large crowd, that we'd be able to host them appropriately. And the city of Tuscaloosa was another heavy partner in making some of that kind of stuff happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to at least pull up some imagery on to just help me a little bit tell the story of the workshops that we presented. So bear with me for a moment as we shift format. So we provided approximately 25 or so workshops to the public. We were using spaces like the Dinah Washington Cultural Arts Center, which is right downtown on Greensboro Avenue. We kind of tried to tie into Art Night, which is going to be the first Friday of every month on a recurring basis, promoting art in downtown Tuscaloosa. So we wanted to make that connection, and that was a big part of our partnership as well. Oh, cool, it's already just running. So you're seeing images primarily at first from the Dinah Washington, where we set up workshop spaces where people could build their own lanterns and be inspired by subjects associated with the Black Warrior River watershed. So we expanded from Hurricane Creek. A larger umbrella would also then include the entire Black Warrior River watershed, and that allows us to have a very similar conversation at a larger scale. We brought in the Black Warrior River Keepers, the Alabama Rivers Alliance. We had a lot of partners that were interested in the message we were trying to send. We got local art teachers here sharing their more unique designs. We had some pretty simple designs that people could come up, even up to the very last day, the day of the parade. People were making their own lanterns, using some of these tissue paper supplies and things like that, and they would bring the lanterns back hopefully to the parade, and it gets them invested. We try to treat our participants as collaborators. They're not just someone that shows up to see the art show that we put on, but they are actually going to be the show. We're going to create this little river of walking light of people that are excited about the topic. So we were concerned about issues of environmental sustainability as we're trying to build objects that might not last forever, but we're also weighing that against how much excitement can we get around a particular topic. So ways that we tried to deal with that, we were using simple materials like tissue paper and wood, occasionally some wire and tape, but these were objects that could be kind of broken down. We were able to use like plastic bottles and things as structures, so we're trying to recycle or reuse materials that might otherwise be discarded. The power supplies we had little lanterns that the lights that we would carry along. Instead of getting something where we're throwing batteries away and getting some more, we're actually using USB rechargeable lights, and we're able to use these for future events. And we're actually using I'll talk a little bit too about some of the events that we would do off-site early on, where we're trying to experiment with some of the lighting effects that we would do to decorate essentially along our parade route. So we were powering those lights in a remote environment using some large-scale batteries that were using solar panels to recharge, and we're using those same systems to try to recharge the lights that the kids are using as they're walking through the parade, things like that. So as much of those kinds of messages as we can embed into our process, we do. I won't say it's without any waste, but we're trying to be consistently conscious of those elements along the way. This is probably kind of running in a cycle, so you've seen the same things. I will say that towards the end, you might have seen like we collaborated with groups like Bug Fest. If you've ever attended something like Bug Fest on campus, we were there this last year, and we had like over 1,000 people are coming to Bug Fest, and they're playing with the same stuff because a lot of the insects that we're kind of thinking about are inhabiting these same ecosystems. So we might sort of have some specialty workshops based on different groups' interests and things like that. Let's see. I know John was in here and we had talked about that. Do you want to talk about John for a little bit, just because it's such an important aspect? I'll see if I can find that picture and get it to stop.
Yeah. So one of the kind of inspirations for our focus on Hurricane Creek was the story of its saving. It was considered to be, by the early 1980s, a biologically dead waterway. And it had been a long beloved kind of community resource, but because of lack of controls on dumping by industrial sources along the river, it had really taken a turn for the worse. And John Wathen, Jamie's going to pull up his picture, who is the founder of the Friends of Hurricane Creek, was a former coal worker and was from the Tuscaloosa area and came across a patch of yellow root. If you know what yellow root, if you're from the Southeast, you may know what that is. It's a plant that's long been used in traditional folk healing for a number of different things. And he discovered this patch of yellow root, and according to him, according to his story, used that to kind of, for his own issues he was having around working in the coal industry and health issues. That inspired him, again, this is coming from his story, that inspired him to actually create an organization of local people to take on the protection of the waterway. And to do that, he used some unconventional methods, including hiring pilots to fly above the Black Warrior River watershed, taking images of illegal dumping, right, suing companies for dumping into the rivers, but ultimately building awareness around Hurricane Creek. And the organization Friends of Hurricane Creek was ultimately successful. If you've been there, you know you can swim in the creek, you can paddle the creek, right? And it's certainly an ongoing fight. But we were really inspired by John's story as a way to show that grassroots agency actually does have impact, especially in a time of climate crisis, right? When we talk a lot about climate paralysis. We wanted to share John's story as a way of showing like how very local actions have a big impact on climate destruction, right? So John was kind of our muse for the story. He's a storyteller and joined us in the workshops. He's also a photographer. He takes really beautiful photographs of both the destruction and the beauty of our watershed. And so he would come, we mounted his photos. He would come sort of talk to workshop attendees about the dangers of, or the fragility of our watershed. And so he's been kind of critical and, again, an inspiration for the larger project.
Yeah. I'll show now a few, I'm going to show two videos. Essentially, that's a quick and easy way to get a sense of what we were really doing. So we've got, I'll do this one first. This video is in our planning stages. It's, well, I don't do two things well at once. Let me click buttons and then I'll talk. Here we go. So early on in our process, we wanted to get a sense of how we had to run the logistics on setting lights up into the wilderness, being off a power grid, and also just trying to have a festive occurrence where we get people together that are trying to help with the project. And so we started doing these lighting experiments out at the Friends of Hurricane Creek property. We did this 2 times it wasn't when we were ready yet to open everything to the public, and yet it still became a big production for us. And so we're trying to measure scale as a few of us with a few volunteers are trying to build something bigger. What is it really going to take? And so you'll see images here of some of the like lantern designs that we would use to decorate the area. This is the mountain laurel flower that's found along Hurricane Creek, and it inspired me to create some sculptures that you're seeing iterations of here, and I've kind of played with that a few times. So those are sculptural elements that I'm bringing in along with just the lighting. At first I thought I was bringing in these LED lights. They're basically kind of like DJ party lights, but they're using a lot of capacities, and here's a little bit of our DJ action. But ultimately, I thought we were going to use those lights to light up our sculptures. And as we started doing some of these experiments to just see if the lights would work, it was so beautiful to activate these spaces at night just with the colored lights. And one of the messages that I wanted to send, and this is also where we're kind of early on we were doing some planning about where the route would go, things like that. But ultimately, I don't want to come in and decorate this beautiful natural environment and say, look at what I did that's better. I can only barely ever keep up with nature if that's my goal. What I would like to do in these moments as an artist is to literally shine a light on it, get people to pay attention in a way that they might otherwise forget about in a moment. It's easy to walk outside and to miss the most beautiful cloud ever just because it's 100 degrees and you're trying to not trip over your shoelaces. So can we get people to pay attention to these things and notice that really what's going on is the beauty of nature? Then can we get them to like come back and still see that beauty on the regular day? It's still there, I guarantee it. So I'll next show you our video from the parade event. And this was part of one of our pinnacle experiences, and Julia is going to talk a little bit more about where this heads. But this is the night in May of 22 that we kind of finally got things open to the public in terms of our parade experience. So we didn't know if we would have 3 people or the 600 or so that showed up. And we had people coming up and we were like, well, maybe we'll have some of our supplies out in case you forgot your lantern. And people were like, I want to build one right now. And it was madness, but it was a joyful madness. And so you see here the crowd processing through. We started before sunset. We had multiple artists as well that we were able to, as we secured more and more funding, we could include more artists to create sculptures to support the event. But like I said, every young kid, every student, every adult that's built their lantern at a workshop and shown up, they are also a collaborator in what we're trying to present. So you get a sense here of kind of the beauty of the night. It really kicked in after we got after dark, but we wanted to be sure we provided an experience that was family friendly and kind of it still worked as the sun was going down. This is one of my favorite sections. Eat My Beats does a lot of support for this kind of event across town. They'll do sound and light and a variety of things in the community, but they provided a lot of the lights that were that section along the cypress trees. There's that 1-foot bridge. That was actually my personal favorite section for the night. And you can kind of see the color change effect kicking in. And we want something that's not just like a bowling alley where you hit the button and everything's just randomized, but there was a beauty to these kind of progressive shifts in the color, and we really enjoyed exploring that. So that gets us through that parade night. I will say that the parade started on one end, and as it got all the way down closer to the public library, everyone was invited across the street to the Transportation Museum, and we had some additional types of events that we were tying in overall. So we're talking about a lot of different things with the history tie-ins, the science tie-ins, the art tie-ins, but Julie's going to talk a little bit about what particularly Selvage brought to the table in terms of those curated events.
Yeah, and if it wasn't clear looking at those images, the lanterns, we encourage people to build lanterns that connected to the ecosystems and to some degree the history of the watershed. And the idea was to get everyone sort of collectively with the symbols that they had each created, right? You get a sort of a powerful statement about placekeeping, right, in the Tuscaloosa area.
Let me pull those up.
Let's see. So I mentioned that I'm a public historian, and in some ways I am looking for a utility of practice that can be applied in this moment of climate crisis. Historians are interested in change over time, and so perhaps we can look back to periods of environmental catastrophe and find stories of agency, and this is how we were sort of thinking about John Wathen's story. But I've learned through this partnership with Jamey and Selvage that these art, humanities, ecology projects have power to bring an affective quality to any storytelling about the relationship between humans and the natural environment, right? So we sort of had the ecological piece, but we also wanted to bring in the kind of humanities, storytelling, human history of the watershed. And we did that through, as Jamey said, a couple of curated installations. Let's see.
I have no idea what that is, but we're on.
Oh, I see. Gotcha. So we worked with artists who were interested in, again, kind of using historical narratives as a part of their contemporary art to join us in a few installations at area galleries. So we worked with, is it moving? Okay. We worked with, for example, printmaker and bookmaker Boo Gilder, who created an installation at the UA Gallery that's part of the Dinah Washington Cultural Arts Center. She used primary sources of Bryce Hospital, right on the river, which of course is a historic, what was called asylum. And those patients had a newspaper, and they often talked about the Black Warrior River. And so she pulled text from this newspaper and sort of created these prose poems on the wall as an example of the ways that we told stories about the watershed. This is Michi Miko, who shared the same exhibit space as Boo Gilder. He is a black artist from Atlanta who is a fly fisherman. And so a lot of his work is a meditation on being black outdoors in the Southeast. And his sculpture work told a story of his father, a story that his father told him called African Crickets, about fishing as a young black man in segregated Alabama and segregated Birmingham. Artist Tony Bingham, who is a professor at Miles College, did a lot of research on the use of waterways by black churches in Tuscaloosa and created an installation that sort of honored the stories that he learned and the research that he did about waterways as sacred spaces. And we, for his installation, we had sort of a multi-sensory inclusion of black spirituals that came from Dr. Levada Harrison, who's on faculty here at the university, Dr. Alexis Davis Hazel, and Earl Hazel. And so people were able to sort of have a sound component, right, that better kind of embodied this experience in a way. And then finally, Kelly Taylor Mitchell is a professor at Spelman College who has ancestral land in Alabama and collected plants from that ancestral land to weave together these really beautiful kind of hanging two-dimensional sculptures. And so all of this was, again, trying to make a way for people to enter the storytelling and the human history of our waterways. And then finally, I don't know why I don't have an image of it, but as Jamey said, the Lantern Parade ended at the Mildred Warner Westervelt Transportation Museum. If you've been there, it's right on Jack Warner Parkway. It's right across from the public library. Many people don't know it's a local history museum that exists. And it used to be Tuscaloosa's segregated public swimming pool, right? So it was created as a swimming pool for whites in the 1940s. It's a beautiful Art Moderne building. The original bleachers for the pool are still there, but the pool has been filled in. And we worked with an artist and writer, Hannah Palmer, to kind of reimagine that space as a former pool and actually reactivate the space as a pool, right, as a desegregated space for swimming. And so we worked and installed lights to kind of basically create a border of the original pool, and the lights were sort of blue and swimming. Children came, and again, the Lantern Parade ended there, so everybody sort of hung up their lantern. We turned on music, and people used the pool as a dance space. There was also an exhibit within the Transportation Museum about the history of the pool and desegregation around public swimming. So again, connected to the human histories of water resources and waterways.
So that is we think, a pretty fast version of what we did in 2022 or from 2019 over that period of time, and we enjoy talking about the project, but we're actually more excited right now to try to build up some momentum towards a new Flow Tuscaloosa project in the upcoming months. So it's still in production, but in a lot of ways things are sped up by the experiences that we've already had, the connections that we've made, and things are going a lot more smoothly with each of the partners that we return to. But what we want to do today is to tell you a little bit about what we have in mind. It's premature for a very public version of what we would be up to, but we were curious if any of you might be interested in joining this collaborative process over the next few months. We thought this would be an opportunity to talk about that. So what we intend to do, I thought a little bit about some of the workshop and parade experiences and things that I would do differently if I could go backwards in time. I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier, but we seem to sort of abandon the Hurricane Creek property as we sought accessibility and to kind of scale things up. And I would like to, kind of in honor of the Friends of Hurricane Creek and what they have given to us and what they're kind of trying to accomplish, we're trying to basically ask questions as a group with them involved. Questions like, what is the future of the Friends of Hurricane Creek? Sadly and unfortunately, John won't be here forever. He's still going strong, and he's quite a force. But what happens in the future? What investment do we have from the community in a space like this? So we're hoping to use these types of activities to build that support and to build a lifeline for the future. We're trying to plant, messages of stewardship. So we'll work with, instead of doing maybe 25 completely different workshops where things feel a little bit spread out, we're seeking a more focused group of probably high school students to work with for a longer period of time. And we're going to treat them as more active collaborators in our process, where they'll get to visit the creek. They'll be able to receive lessons on ecology and art in their home school environment, but they'll also be able to go out to Hurricane Creek's property on field trips and really experience this stuff hands-on. We want to actually do something really special and unique, which would be a sunset canoe trip. So very similar to what we're doing as the parade, but that's something that I could not logistically accomplish for 600 people and not lose a couple. So what we're trying to do is just set up a sunset canoe trip with the lights and everything towards the end, so that we're really getting them into that inspirational mode and that we're trying to connect them to that space in a magical way. Then hopefully they're going to help us with some observational drawings, different exercises and workshop activities that we've got planned. They'll help us to build more complex sculptural lanterns than the ones that we're kind of doing for everybody with a quick bit of tissue paper and a plastic recycled bottle. So we're bringing some laser cutters in. We actually used the laser cutters a lot in the previous one, but I also want to have a laser cutter that's on site where you can see it actually happening, because that's an exciting part of the process. So little technology things that we've kind of worked out, little on-site things that we've worked out. We'll have a series of events that include property managed and operated by the Friends of Hurricane Creek, where we did some of those early experiments with some of the smaller groups. We will return to the Riverwalk is our goal, to be able to do a reverse version of that same parade so that we end in the new River District Park area. And it's over near the Indigo Hotel and Heritage House underneath the bridge by the amphitheater. They've recently finished the renovations of that space, and they have a lot of colored lights and some stage areas that would really complement what we're trying to do. Again, this way we kind of create a two-way street with the city of Tuscaloosa and try to show off what they have invested in these spaces as well. So we'll have a Riverwalk kind of parade again, but the following week we'll be doing something very similar at the Hurricane Creek Park that's managed by PARA. They do have parking, pavilion spaces, and things like that. I don't know that we'll have the same capacity as we do at the Riverwalk, but we're negotiating all of those events for just next spring. So this will be probably in early April through mid-April for some of those highlight events, and working with those school groups throughout the semester, probably starting in January. So we're still securing some of the grants for those activities. We've got a lot of the equipment that we had before. We've got some great ideas and some great people to work with, and we're kind of inviting you today, if you're curious, to potentially join that process. There are other activities that this format starts to extend out and potentially apply to as well. So we're talking to folks down in the Mobile Bay area. There are a lot of river system conversations about ecology throughout the state, and we're trying to represent Alabama well, bring some good ideas to some other spaces. And again, we're able to use this same equipment multiple times, the same format, but we start applying it to different ecosystems, and it really scales up well. So yeah, I think we've got some ideas for sort of North Mobile Bay that could be the following year. Some things down at Dauphin Island. They've got a lot of research facilities and similar conversations. But then it becomes exciting because we're opening up a brand new ecosystem with different visual things to try to bring forward. So it's new every time, but we're trying to use this formula over and over again. I feel like we're around where we want to be able to start talking with you. We can always talk some more, but my students glaze over when I talk for 30 minutes, and I see it going out their ear. I'm curious if you guys have got any kinds of questions right off the bat. I can ramble some more, though. Thoughts?
Nice talk. Have you guys heard about Kelly Alley in Auburn? You should definitely check out. I've listened to a similar talk almost 10 years back. She has worked on multiple major river systems, like Ganges, for example, and she actually has a textbook on that. She's from anthropology, arts program, and she has done that. Basically, she figured out a way to scale this thing up from a Hurricane Creek to, say, you want to look at a river basin. She's got some very interesting, check her literature. So I was just wondering, how do we get like a scholarly output out of this? Like, what do we learn from it, and how do we create scholarship out of this thing for students and academia and things like that? Any thoughts on that?
So actually, just before we started this Flow Tuscaloosa project, I was working with some folks in the museum, and it connected over to the biology department. Guy Becker was at the University of Alabama in the biology department and was working on some research on chytrid fungus, which is impacting amphibians across the world, but he was particularly focused on ecosystem comparisons between the Amazon and Alabama. And he may or may not know about the abundant diversity, the biodiversity in Alabama being a really important resource that we're trying to promote more and more. His research was vast in terms of its scale. It covered a lot of different things. But one thing that you'll find often in these research grants is a need to communicate these results in an effective way with the community. And what we were talking about, like I was approached early on because they were thinking so they had a great idea already. And the idea was that they would build these micro exhibits that would visit spaces, particularly that don't have access to the museum quality information, that we can like walk over into Smith Hall and see some amazing things. But can we put a micro exhibit into a library in a space that doesn't have any resources like that? People aren't going to get in a bus and get to Tuscaloosa. Can we bring some of this information to them? Because often the same kind of water quality issues, for example, that are impacting these amphibians are actually affecting the human beings that live there too. And can we create this coexistence type of conversation about stewardship and improving the world around us? So they asked me if we could do something like an art show. Maybe we, after these micro exhibits go out, we could kind of invite people through the micro exhibit to do a drawing contest about frogs and send it in. We'll get some artists like me with our great opinions to tell, who did the better frog and who did the worst frog, and we'll put them up on the wall. You may have attended an event like this, and they're not bad. I'm okay with some art contests promoting something. But I had the idea at that point that we could do more. We could, and I'm thinking from a perspective as an artist where I don't want to just tell my story and everybody out there is the audience. Like, you're an audience today. It's kind of sad. Like, I want to be sitting out there and we're all pointing at stuff together and we've got a lot of ideas because, as you mentioned, there are a lot of good ideas already happening. We don't need to reinvent the wheel on this stuff, but we need to create effective connections that feel like positive motivation and move us forward. So I'm on a tangent there, but ultimately with the chytrid fungus project, we're, in addition to the micro exhibits that we're designing to be, we're CNC routing them out and trying to make them like, adaptable to other topics, things like that. That's fun and good. We're also trying to build a series of lantern workshops that would accompany that content. We will present that. April's going to be a busy month for me because around Earth Day of April next year, we're going to be at the Botanical Gardens in Birmingham, tentatively, to present a light show lantern festival in the very same capacity, but focused on these chytrid fungus amphibian relationships, water quality issues. So that, very long-winded way answers your question about how can we relate this to research. I like it personally as an artist. Like, it is my research, so I'm set. But it's all about connections, and so what we often do, and Julia was kind of hinting at this too, where there are a number of collaborators involved in this entire process. So we can limit our collaborators to research on campus, or we can expand our collaborators to include a variety of entities throughout the community. And what you have to do is slow down and listen. We created an advisory committee that wasn't just us with our great ideas. It's like, where are there holes in what we're doing? They're always there, but are you actually taking a moment to address that and try to respond? And as it, like, there does come a point where there's only so much that you can do with your idea and the time and the money that you've got in front of you, and you can get overwhelmed. And I was a little tired when we walked away in 22, but I needed a break, but I'm excited to come back in 24. So we want our partners to also feel the same way. Does everybody cringe when they get that call from us, or are they excited? Have we planted that spark of interest? And so for me, at the heart of all of the Flow Tuscaloosa type of stuff that we're talking about is the spirit of collaboration and this positive feeling when we're talking about daunting topics like environmental stewardship. Is this just a downhill trip? I know it can be depressing. Like, we could get up here and tell you how bad it's going to be. That's not a hard presentation for me to put together. I think most of us kind of know that, and I hope that a lot of the people that are here already feel that energy. But you're here also because you want to do something to move forward in a positive way, and that we need to respond yesterday, but today's better than tomorrow. So that's a rant. I don't know.
I guess I would just add that we also built into the project a lot of assessment. So we have metrics about how, based on participants' response, about how well we are messaging, how well we get our messages across. And I think over time, if we continue to do that, we could use that to sort of make more scholarly research on how we're actually, what we're actually imparting in this project.
If we had 25 workshops, it's spread a little thin. It's effective, it was positive, those folks were showing up and saying, when are we doing this again? And that was a win for us. But one of the things I want to do with a more focused group is maybe assess over time, what do they know about these resources before we get started? What do they learn along the way? What are they doing a year later? Have they forgotten all about us and Hurricane Creek? Or over a longer period of time, are we maybe chaining together the next John Wathen? And I think that that's out there, and I want us to think in that bigger way. But it's nice to create these metrics that help us fit that into a more of a research environment where we probably get our dime. Other questions or thoughts?
So if you're looking at kind of moving across the state, you reached out to other universities. I know before I graduated of University of Montevallo, there are programs there. I know Kelly Wacker and Amy Feger have tried to actually reintroduce descriptive drawing for species, so kind of going back to that Darwinian type of documenting species through like very detailed drawings. That's a program that they're trying to go and focus around the Cahaba River, so they've been pushing that. And then the city of Montevallo in general is also a very kind of like arts strong community with the Orr Park, Tinglewood, Shoal Creeks right there. I mean, this sounds like something that they would be probably interested in doing as well.
I like it a lot. Yeah, Amy and Kelly are both good friends, and they're doing amazing work. So this gets into weird, dangerous territory for us too, because there's a lot of obvious connections that need to be made. But I don't mean obvious to discount your comment at all. We actually want that. And we need the reminder. And we're at this critical time where we're trying to do the next thing, and we come out of the last one worn out, and we've got to remember that always. That there's amazing work already going on, and in a lot of ways too, it's not that we did Flow Tuscaloosa. It's that if we pulled that list of people up, that's not even a big enough we. So I think that we is a big Alabama kind of a situation, or it can often expand out on like a part of a Gulf Coast Futures Consortium and stuff like that, and it's trying to kind of like pair up with people across the entire Gulf Coast, and I kind of feel like I need to step up Alabama's presence in that, but then I realize that we are doing it in a lot of ways, and it's just making those connections. It's the constant problem that's like that we have this net that we're collecting all this stuff, and it seems like everything's falling out of these holes, but I think if we look at the water instead of the net, it's all there. Everybody is doing amazing work, and there's a lot of opportunities for us to continue to enhance that. I want to see that happen, and I think Montevallo is right around the corner too. I'll admit too that a little bit we have to compete with groups like the Cahaba River, because they have tremendous success and momentum, and it's a great example of how to succeed in these environments, and yet we wanted to honor the Friends of Hurricane Creek in a local way. And what we've found is that that's an undercurrent. We shouldn't ever talk about that. I shouldn't bring it up here today that there's any kind of a competitive issue of who's getting resources or who's further ahead. The truth is that any of the people that are involved in those conversations always want to help. But we did want to start with a little bit of a home strength kind of situation, but I think that it inevitably connects to our neighbors and hopefully continues to do so. You had a question too?
Yeah, so I'm part of a project in Nebraska that has it's focused on aquatic ecosystems and has an artist as a PI on the project, and the focus there is a little different. So I just guess I'm wondering, even thinking about it, it's what Katie Anya is the professor's name there, and what she's sort of really engaged in are unique ways to communicate and express ecological and hydrological data through art in different forms. For example, there are Native American wristbands that were historically used to do accounting, and we've been using that to represent stoichiometric data, so relative abundance of elements and organisms and that kind of stuff. And so I wonder whether or not the art, certainly I'm just thinking about this looking at the current slide, but the light installations, etc., if they're grounded in representing something from the natural world with respect to these stream and river ecosystems, or are they more designed to just engage the participant?
There's always a reason, there's always content. With that large umbrella that we set over the project, it included, I kind of mentioned like it was like history, science, and art, or maybe we're using art to tie these things together. There was always a path of justification for how it fit, but what we wanted to do was to actually open more pathways where instead of us coming in and imposing, like almost like the chytrid fungus art contest, everybody draw a frog. I feel like that's a failure on the artist's part and as an initiative that we set forth into the community. I would rather invite the community to bring to us what the river means to them. And that was kind of our approach. And so each of the art installations might feel a little bit more sophisticated or distant from a frog lantern, but we're also trying to tie our community in not only to the ecosystem and stewardship concepts, but also to the art world, where sometimes there are things that feel a little personal or a little difficult to talk about, and we're looking for ways to express that. And I feel that we created very powerful shows in what Julia just covered that was curated by the Selvage Group, but it really gave a lot of creative freedom to those artists to try to see what could fit under that umbrella. And we are also now inviting our group of 600 people that are a more traditional audience for they're not used to the weird of the art gallery, and we want them to feel more and more comfortable crossing those barrier type lines, and we want to invite them into an art gallery. And there is a connection, there's a meaningful connection, and especially if you get a chance to engage with the material more and more, you start to deepen your own understanding of someone else's story. But what we're really trying to do is we're trying to connect community. So if our goal is strictly environmental education, we might be failing in a couple of places, but I think that we're doing something that's maybe bigger than that. if we let everyone feel like their voice has a real stake in how this turns out. There's this feeling with the sort of the research outcomes. If we go to if we have a science project and we need to just kind of water it down so that it works in a third grade library, then we're probably not talking about the research. But if instead of that cynical view, we think about the real need to plant seeds of interest in science at that age, what can we do to seed that curiosity and to bring them back? It's a complex system and it all connects, or it maybe feels like it falls apart at times. We're taking a lot on with a project like this if it's going to be that spread out, but I think there's some intention to the weirdness and the distance and the personal stories that are occurring in the gallery, along with the smiles and Crayola markers all over the faces of some children. Other thoughts, responses, or questions? How are we on time? You want me to drag it out?
No, I think we'll give an opportunity for people to come up and ask individual things and chat. Thanks for coming, everybody. We'll see you next month.
Yeah.
Let's thank our speakers again.
Thank you all for coming.